Section 1. The First Snowfall of War. November 30th, 1939. The forests north of Lake Ladoga, Finland. A gray dawn bleeds across the treetops, turning the frost-caked pines into pale silhouettes. Snow falls in slow, silent sheets, muffling every sound except the crunch of boots and the low cough of an idling engine. Private Eero Hämäläinen, a 21-year-old mechanic turned tank driver, presses his gloved hand to the frozen steel of his vehicle. The machine is small, laughably so, he thinks, barely taller than a man, with armor thin enough to be pierced by a heavy rifle round. To the Soviets, it is a Lelupansari, a toy tank. But this morning, as the Eero peers through the slotted vision port of the Vickers 6-ton, the nickname feels more like a curse than a joke. Far ahead, the rhythmic thunder of Soviet artillery rolls across the frozen lake like distant surf. The winter war has begun. Columns of the Red Army, soldiers of the 138th Rifle Regiment, supported by T-26 tanks and Katyusha-like bombardments, have breached the border before sunrise. War planners in Moscow predicted a swift victory, a political walkover that would push the border away from Leningrad and show Stalin's strength. Soviet propaganda bragged that Finland would fall within 2 weeks. But the forests here are thick, the roads narrow, the temperature already plummeting toward -20. And the men fighting for Finland, farmers, hunters, reservists, carpenters, mechanics, know every bend of every frozen trail. Inside the cramped hull of the tiny tank, Eero listens as the engine sputters in the cold. The crew commander, Sergeant Arni Virtanen, slaps the side of the turret with a mittened hand. "Keep her warm," Arni mutters. "She freezes, we die." The Vickers 6-ton is a British design, purchased by Finland years earlier when tanks seemed little more than curiosities. Only a handful were assembled locally at the Volshan Tikatetas state artillery factory. Their armor is thin. Their engines strain in the cold. Their 37mm Bofors gun rattles the entire frame when fired. But they are what Finland has, along with a handful of armored tractors crudely up-armored and retrofitted with makeshift steel plates. To the Soviets, these machines are objects of ridicule. Red Army officers had laughed that Finnish armor looked like farm equipment, not battlefield vehicles. Some even joked that Soviet infantry could push them off the road with their bare hands. Eero thinks of those jokes now as snow thickens on the engine deck. He wipes his goggles, breath steaming inside his scarf. The tank smells of cold metal and diesel, the scents clinging to every corner of the tiny interior. A call comes over the radio. Static-laden, fragile in the cold air. Enemy armor sighted near Kollaa Bridge. Light elements to intercept. Arni pulls his scarf down. "That's us." They rumble forward through the pines, the tank's tracks biting into the hard crust of snow. The forest seems to swallow them whole. Visibility drops to a few dozen yards. Branches scrape the tank sides. Every sound feels amplified. The grinding gears, the hissing radiator, the metal clinks of ice forming on the hull. Eero feels his heartbeat quicken. He has never fired at another human being. He has trained in the summer sun, when the air smelled of pine sap and the fields were green. That world feels impossibly far away now. Ahead, a Finnish ski patrol emerges like wraiths between the trees. Their white camouflage blends perfectly with the falling snow. One of them, Lieutenant Jukka Lehtinen, raises a gloved hand to halt the tank. Soviets on the road ahead. Jukka whispers through Arni's open hatch. T-20 SIXS. At least 3. Infantry column behind them. They're slow. Clumsy. Arni nods. Perfect. The lieutenant glances at the little tank, snow collecting on its turret. "They'll underestimate you," he says. "Make it count." Eero swallows hard. Underestimate. Laugh at. Mock. Every Soviet joke echoes in his mind. The tank edges forward until they reach the crest of a small rise overlooking a narrow forest road. Below, the Soviet column advances cautiously. Tanks first, infantry strung out behind them. Engines growl in the frigid air. Exhaust plumes rip upward like flags of white fire. Eero feels the moment before the ambush like a physical pressure in his chest. The turret swings. The gunner murmurs distance. 150 meters. 120. 100. Arnie's voice is calm but sharp as ice. Fire. The blast rocks the tiny tank. The recoil slams through Arrow's bones. The shell streaks into the lead T-26. And to everyone's surprise, the Soviet tank erupts into a fireball. Flames punching skyward. Soviet infantry scatter, shouting in shock. Before they recover, the second shot lands. Then a third. Within seconds, the forest road is chaos, shouts, explosions, the crack of Finnish rifles from the treeline. The Vickers crew loads and fires, the tank trembling with each shot. No one is laughing now. Arrow realizes it in that instant, watching the Soviets break formation, slip on ice, dive behind the burning wrecks of their own tanks. The toy tank is no joke. Not here. Not in this winter. Not in this war. The ambush is just beginning. Section 2. The forest road ignites. The forest road is chaos. Flames from the shattered T-26 lick upward, casting orange light across the snow as more Soviet infantry scramble for cover. The frigid morning, once silent, has erupted into a maelstrom of gunfire, echoes, and smoke. The Vickers bucks again under the force of another 37mm round, and the casing clatters to the floor plates. Inside the cramped turret, Sergeant Arnie Virtanen shouts orders over the metallic clang of the breech. The small tank stinks of propellant, sharp, choking, and hot. Frost melts on the inner walls, dripping in tiny rivulets that run down Arrow Hämäläinen's gloves. Arrow grips the controls tighter as the tracks grind forward. The tank advances only a few meters at a time, nudging into better firing positions between the trees. Through the narrow vision slit, he sees Finnish ski troops weaving through the pines like ghosts, rifles cracking in short, disciplined bursts. The Soviets, bright against the snow in their brown greatcoats, move clumsily in the confusion. To the right, a Soviet machine gun nest begins firing wildly, sweeping the treeline. Sparks bloom against the Vickers armor as rounds ricochet off the sloped front plate. The impacts sound like hailstones hitting a tin roof. Arnie ducks instinctively. Driver, angle us left. Use that drift as cover. Arrow doesn't hesitate. He jerks the control levers, and the tank lurches sideways into a shallow snowbank. The left track churns, kicking up powder. The gunner, Corporal Ilkka Karjalainen, mutters a quick prayer as he swings the turret toward the machine gun. Range, 80 meters, firing. Another deafening crack. Snow erupts where the shell lands. Then the machine gun position goes silent. But the Soviets are regrouping. The second T-26, realizing the direction of fire, crawls forward through the smoke. Its turret pivots sluggishly, searching for the source of the ambush. Its gun barrel, longer, thicker, more menacing than the Vickers, glints in the half-light. If it spots them, Arrow knows one solid hit could tear their little tank apart. Arnie slams the hatch closed. Ilkka! Before he sights us, now! Ilkka breathes out slowly, lining up the shot. The Vickers creaks as the turret inches over the snow. The Soviet tank seems impossibly big this close, its armor plates thick, its silhouette hulking and confident. Heat ripples above its engine deck. For a moment, everything narrows to the trembling reticle inside Ilkka's gun sight. Then, the Vickers fires. The recoil jars every bolt in the tank. For a split second, Arrow can't see anything through the vision slit but a wall of smoke. When it clears, the Soviet tank is still moving. The shot bounced. Ilkka curses under his breath. Load! Load! The gunner's assistant slams another shell into the breech, fingers moving frantically despite numb gloves. The Soviet turret is rotating now, slowly, but with certainty. A faint whine of motors. A heavy grind. They have seconds. Arnie's voice hardens. Ilkka center turret ring. Aim low. Ilkka exhales again, steadying the sight picture. Arrow feels his pulse hammering in his throat. The Soviet tank looms larger, larger. The Vickers fires. This time, the shell punches directly into the T-20SIXS turret ring, the vulnerable seam where turret meets hull. The explosion is immediate and catastrophic. Flames burst from the turret hatches, and the Soviet tank shudders, tracks locking up as it grinds to a halt. The turret jams halfway through a rotation, frozen in place by molten steel. Inside the Vickers, the crew nearly collapses from relief. "Good hit," Arnie says, wiping sweat from his brow despite the biting cold. "Another one for scrap. But they can't rest. Not here." Soviet infantry are pushing forward again. More cautiously this time, using the wreckage as cover. A grenade detonates nearby, showering the Vickers with snow and fragments. Finnish rifle fire snaps from the woods, and a few Molotov-carrying ski troopers rush past the tank, heading toward the crippled T-26 to finish the job. Eero watches them dart across the burning road. He recognizes one, Private Kalevi Mäkinen, a farmhand from Rahi with a shy smile and a fondness for berry wine. Kalevi's white suit blends into the snow so perfectly that only his scarf and rifle distinguish him from the landscape. He carries 2 bottles, gasoline-filled, cloth-wicked, homemade. He reaches the damaged tank, leaps atop it with astonishing confidence, and smashes a bottle against the engine deck. Flames roar instantly across the steel. A second bottle lands inside the open hatch. The interior sparks like a furnace. Kalevi jumps down and races back toward the treeline just as Soviet riflemen open fire. Snow erupts around him. He dives, rolls, vanishes behind a drift. Arnie mutters, "Brave fool. He'll get himself killed." But his voice carries quiet admiration. The forest is filled now with smoke, drifting in slow, heavy sheets. Through it, Eero sees the Soviet infantry wavering. Not broken yet, but uncertain. The ambush has stalled them. Fear spreads like frost. Arnie leans down into the driver's compartment. "Eero, push us forward. Slowly. They need to see we're not running." The Vickers rumbles ahead. Its engine growls defiantly in the frozen air. The little tank, with its thin armor and mocking Soviet nicknames, emerges from the smoke like a steel phantom, its gun trained on the disoriented infantry. The Soviets hesitate. Just a moment. But a moment is enough. A whistle shrieks behind the Finns, Lieutenant Leightonen's signal. From both sides of the road, Finnish ski troops surge forward, rifles cracking in disciplined volleys. They move fast, low, precise, striking before the Soviets can regain momentum. The line bends, then breaks. The Soviet infantry retreat into the forest, leaving behind burning vehicles, scattered crates, and the bodies of fallen comrades. The Vickers tracks grind over spent casings and shattered ice as the tank rolls deeper into the smoking battlefield. The first victory of the day is theirs. But the winter war has only begun, and far greater trials lie ahead. Section 3. Into the White Hell. The smoke drifts slowly through the pines, thinning as the wind picks up. The morning sun, weak and pale, filters through the trees, casting long bars of light across the battlefield. The Soviets have pulled back, leaving silence where chaos reigned minutes earlier. But the silence is uneasy, tense, filled with the knowledge that this was only the first wave. Eero Hämäläinen pulls off one glove and wipes a smear of soot from the inside of the vision slit. His hand trembles from the recoil, from adrenaline, from the cold. The metal around him hums like a living thing, still vibrating from the last shot. Tiny flakes of frost fall from the ceiling plates as the tank settles. Sergeant Arnie Virtanen lifts himself halfway out of the hatch, scanning the treetops. Snowflakes cling to his eyelashes. The smoke of the burning tanks rises in thin columns, dark against the white. "Driver," he says quietly, "hold position. Let the skis finish the clearing." Eero nods, though Arnie's calm does little to settle the churn inside his stomach. He knows what comes next. After every ambush, every burst of violence, Finnish soldiers move through the scene, rifles ready, checking for wounded, gathering ammunition, ensuring no Soviet stragglers remain hidden in the snow. But this time, something feels different. Private Kalevi Mäkinen jogs up beside the Vickers, panting from exertion. His breath streams in white clouds. He taps the hull twice. "All clear on the west side," he says. "But they'll be back." They had scouts moving toward Raate Road. "A bigger force is coming." Arnie nods. "We expected that." Arrow hears the words and feels a cold knot settle in his chest. This ambush had gone well, better than expected, but the Soviet strength is overwhelming. Everyone knows it. The Red Army fields hundreds of tanks, thousands of infantry, entire divisions trained for frontal assault. Finland's resistance is a miracle of timing, terrain, and sheer willpower. But miracles don't last forever. Kalevi catches his breath, adjusts the strap on his rifle. The lieutenant says to reposition. They want armor on the ridgeline. Soviet recon spotted near the river bend. He pauses, eyeing the small tank with something between admiration and disbelief. You boys fight like devils in this little thing. Arnie smirks. If it moves and shoots, we'll use it. Kalevi nods once, then disappears back into the trees. Arnie slides back into the turret and thumps the inside wall. Arrow, warm up the tracks. We're moving. Arrow presses the starter. The engine coughs, sputters, then steadies with a deep, throaty rumble. The tank shivers like a cold animal awakening. As they maneuver through the forest, the sun remains low, barely brushing the tops of the snow-laden branches. Visibility drops again, snowflakes thickening. The cold deepens. Even with gloves, Arrow can barely feel the control levers. The Vickers grinds over fallen branches, its tracks creaking. The engine struggles, coughing as the temperature dips further. Inside, the walls grow slick with condensation. Every exhale clouds the cramped compartment. Ilkka Karjalainen, the gunner, wipes his forehead. Feels like the steel is shrinking, he mutters. Another 5 degrees and this whole tank will freeze shut. Arnie checks the temperature gauge. It held at Kollaa. It'll hold here. But Ilkka isn't convinced. These machines weren't built for this. The Soviets can mock them all they want, but even they know this cold kills. Arnie's voice softens, just slightly. All the more reason to keep moving. If we stop too long, the engine seizes. And then we're done. The forest opens into a frozen clearing. The snow here is untouched, pristine. No tracks, no signs of life. Only the whisper of wind and the low roar of the Vickers engine fill the air. Arrow brings the tank to a halt under a cluster of pines overlooking a shallow ravine. From here, the road curves toward Kollaa, the region already becoming a whispered legend among Finnish soldiers. Rumors fly faster than orders. Stories of snipers like Simo Haiha stopping entire platoons. Stories of units holding lines with nothing but hunting rifles and grit. Finnish wartime humor calls Kollaa the place where Finland refuses to die. Arrow hopes the stories are true. Arnie lifts the periscope and scans the horizon. Something's moving, he says quietly. Range? Maybe 600 meters. Ilkka adjusts the turret, angling it toward the distant ridgeline. Through the falling snow, shapes appear. First vague shadows, then clearer silhouettes. Soviet infantry, marching in tight formation. Dozens. No more than that. A full company at least. Behind them, the outline of armored vehicles materializes. Broad hulls, tall turrets. Not T-20 SIXS this time. These shapes are heavier, square. Arrow's breath catches. BT-7s. Arnie mutters. Fast tanks. He says the words with an edge of dread. The BT-7s may be thinly armored, but they are quick, far quicker than the Vickers or any improvised Finnish vehicle. On open ground, they could easily flank, surround, overrun. But this isn't open ground. This is Finnish forest. Finnish winter. Finnish home. Arnie's voice becomes iron. Ilkka. Load armor-piercing. Arrow, hold steady. We can't let them break through. Arrow nods, mouth dry. The tank vibrates beneath him. Snow falls harder, the flakes thick and wet now, plastering the sides of the tank. Ilkka loads the shell. Ready. The Soviet column marches closer, unaware of the eyes watching them from the ridge. Their breath hangs in the air as one mass. Boots crunch in steady rhythm. Engines rumble behind them. Arnie opens the hatch just enough to breathe cold air into his lungs. He watches, waiting for the perfect moment. Not yet, he whispers. Arrow's hands tighten on the controls. Ilkka's finger rests on the firing lever. The Soviets march deeper into the kill zone. Arnie lowers his head back into the turret. Now, the Vickers roars. The BT-7 in front explodes in a bloom of fire and steel, its turret blasting upward in a shower of sparks. The ambush begins again. Section 4. The ravine turns red. The explosion rolls across the ravine like thunder, bouncing between the ice-crusted pines and echoing down into the hollow below. The first BT-7 lies split open, its turret thrown aside like a discarded can. Flames pour from the ruptured hull, melting deep holes into the snow. The Soviet infantry freeze in place. For a heartbeat, the entire column seems suspended in shock. Every soldier turning, eyes widening, breaths forming white halos around their faces. Their officers shout, but the wind carries the words away. In the next moment, chaos erupts. Arnie's voice sharpens, slicing through the cramped interior of the tank. Load! Ilkka Karjalainen slams another armor-piercing round into the breech. The shell clicks home with a harsh metallic snap, and he swings the barrel a few degrees to the left. Second tank, range 250. Arnie barks. Arrow steadies the Vickers, pressing the clutch and brake just enough to anchor it. The tiny tank vibrates from the engine strain, but it holds firm. Ilkka fires. The shell streaks through the falling snow and slams directly into the side of the second BT-7. The tank lurches, buckles, then falls silent, its engine whining to a stop as smoke curls from its vents. But the Soviets are recovering. Machine gun fire rips through the air, stitching black holes into the snow. Tracer rounds whistle past the Vickers, slashing through branches overhead. Soviet infantry fan out, dropping into firing positions, rifles snapping upward. Arnie ducks into the turret. Down! They've spotted us. Arrow crouches instinctively, though the steel hull around him is their only real protection. A burst of automatic fire rakes the tank's front plate, making the armor ring like struck iron. Chips of paint scatter across the driver's compartment. Driver! Arnie shouts over the din. Pull us back 10 meters. Use the ridge for defilade. Arrow yanks the levers. The Vickers jolts backward, its tracks clawing at the icy soil. Snow kicks up in waves behind the tank. As they slide behind the low ridge, the incoming fire shifts, spraying the crest where they had been seconds earlier. Inside the turret, Ilkka wipes sweat from his brow despite the cold. His voice trembles slightly. They're advancing. Fast. Arnie peers through the periscope. They want to overwhelm us before we reload. But they're bunching up. He smiles, a tight, dangerous smile. Perfect. From the left flank, Finnish ski troops appear again, silent as winter itself. They slide along the tree line in perfect formation, using fallen branches and drifts for cover. In their hands, bundled cloth bottles glisten with gasoline. Homemade grenades hang from their belts. Their rifles rest slung across their backs. Leading them is Lieutenant Jukka Leitinen. He raises one arm. The Vickers crew sees it even through the swirling snow. Ilkka mutters, Molotov time. The ski troops surge down the ridge, skis whispering across the crusty snow. They move in a coordinated wave, breaking into pairs, weaving between trees, angling toward the Soviet flank. Arnie slaps the turret wall. Support them. Load he. Ilkka rips open a wooden crate, grabs a high-explosive shell, and heaves it into the breach. The tank jolts backward as the blast roars outward, sending a plume of snow and shrapnel into a tight cluster of Soviet infantry who had begun advancing uphill. Men fall. Others dive for cover. Confusion ripples through the ranks. Then the Molotovs start to fly. Glass shatters against BT-7 armor plates. Flames blossom across the tank decks, racing along the engine vents. One Soviet driver panics and swerves. The tank skids on ice, crashes into a tree, and flips partly onto its side, its engine screaming before choking out. The Finns move faster than the Soviets can adjust, darting between pines, hurling bottles, vanishing into the smoke. Arrow stares through the vision slit, breath held. He watches Kalevi Mäkinen again, this time sprinting dangerously close to a Soviet tank. Flames lick up its rear hull, but the BT-7's turret remains intact, its machine gun raking the ridge with blind fury. "Calavy! Back!" someone shouts, but Calavy doesn't back away. He leaps onto the tank's tracks, grabs the railing, and swings himself onto the hull. The turret turns slowly, too slowly. Calavy smashes a bottle against the commander's hatch. Fire erupts instantly. A Soviet tanker inside screams as he tries to open the hatch. Too late. Flames pour inward. The turret stops moving. The Finnish soldiers cheer, but the sound is lost beneath another explosion. A third BT-7, one untouched, has advanced past its burning comrades. His gun swivels toward the ridge, aiming directly at the Vickers. Arnie sees it in the periscope. "Arrow forward. Now!" Arrow pushes the throttle. The Vickers lunges downward into the ravine, catching the Soviets off guard. Ilka swings the turret frantically. The BT-7 fires. The shell whistles overhead, blasting a tree apart behind them. Splinters rain down like wooden shrapnel. Ilka doesn't wait for an order. He fires. The round hits the BT-7's left track assembly. The tank stumbles, grinds, then emits a harsh metallic scream as the track tears free. The vehicle veers sideways, its momentum carrying it into a cluster of Soviet infantry who scatter just in time. The disabled BT-7 tries to turn, its turret still active, still hunting. Arnie's voice booms. "Ilka! One more! Finish it!" But Arrow feels the engine sputter. The cold is winning. A terrible grinding sound rises from beneath the seat. "Sergeant! We're losing power!" Arrow shouts. Arnie doesn't hesitate. "Give me everything you've got." Arrow slams the throttle, praying the engine holds. Ilka lines up the shot. The Soviet tank's gun turns toward them. For a moment, both turrets are pointed at each other. 2 barrels, 2 crews, 2 breaths. Ilka pulls the trigger. The Vickers lurches as the shell detonates. The BT-7's turret detonates a fraction of a second later. Shrapnel flies in all directions. Flames roll outward. The explosion washes over the ravine, lighting the falling snow orange. The Soviet column breaks. Infantry scatter into the woods. Officers shout in vain. A handful of stragglers fire blindly over their shoulders before disappearing into the blizzard. Suddenly, almost impossibly, the battlefield is quiet again. Only the crackling of burning tanks and the soft whisper of snowfall remains. Inside the Vickers, the crew sags in exhaustion. Ilka leans against the turret wall, panting. Arnie lowers himself slowly, his shoulders trembling from the cold and strain. Arrow wipes frost from his eyelashes, breathing hard. Arnie finally speaks. "That," he says hoarsely, "wasn't even the main force." No one answers, because all 3 of them understand what that means. The Winter War is only beginning. The Soviets aren't retreating for good. And Finland's toy tanks will face far worse before dawn comes again. Section 5. The Blizzard That Never Ends. For several long minutes, the only sounds are the soft hiss of burning fuel and the whisper of snow drifting over metal. The battlefield lies littered with broken machines. Hulls cracked open, turrets blasted off their mounts, tracks twisted like torn ribbon. The ravine is a graveyard of steel and silence. Eero Hämäläinen forces himself to breathe steadily. The adrenaline is crashing out of his veins, leaving behind a hollow exhaustion. His hands ache from clenching the controls. His legs are numb from hours pressed against cold steel. Sergeant Arnie Virtanen opens the hatch and pulls himself halfway out, his boots scraping against metal still warm from the engine. He scans the horizon with slow, heavy movements. The falling snow blurs everything beyond a few dozen meters. Shapes drift in and out of the white trees, smoke columns, distant shadows. "Ilka," Arnie says, voice low, "check ammunition." The gunner nods weakly, prying open the wooden crates stacked along the tank's interior. His gloves tremble as he counts shells, muttering under his breath. After a moment he stops. "That's 14 rounds left," he says. "Half of them we're running dry." Arnie exhales, the sound sharp and worried. "We'll need resupply before nightfall." Eero knows what that means. Nightfall here is not darkness, it is annihilation. The cold deepens by 20 degrees the moment the sun drops behind the ridge. Engines freeze. Weapons jam. Men who stop moving for even a minute grow sluggish, then numb, then still. And the Soviets know it. Arnie drops back inside, sealing the hatch with a grunt. The interior grows dim, lit only by a tiny, flickering lamp mounted above the radio. Frost forms along the edges of the glass, spreading like veins. Ilka leans back, wiping sweat and condensation from his face. If they hit us again before we rearm, we're done. Aero's voice is barely a whisper. What if the main force is already on the move? It's not an unreasonable fear. Soviet doctrine favors mass assaults, waves of infantry supported by dozens of tanks. If a battalion or regiment pushes through these woods, the little Vickers stands no chance in a sustained engagement. Arnie doesn't answer immediately. He rests his hand against the cold turret wall, as if feeling the heartbeat of the machine itself. Then, he says finally, "We do what Finns always do." Ilka asks, "What's that?" Arnie meets his eyes. "We hold until everything breaks. Them or us." Before Ilka can respond, the radio crackles to life. Static hisses, then a strained voice pushes through. "All units, regroup at position Sampo 3. Repeat, Sampo 3. Enemy probing south of Kollaa. Armor sighted. We." The message cuts off in a burst of static. Arnie adjusts the dials. "HQ is getting hammered. We need to move." Aero nods, restarting the engine. The tank shudders, the cold biting deep into its components. A horrible grinding noise echoes under the floorboards. Ilka flinches. "That doesn't sound good." "It's cold," Aero mutters. "Everything sounds bad in this weather." But the sound doesn't go away. It worsens as the Vickers rolls forward, tracks squealing under sheets of ice. The engine sputters, then catches in uneven bursts. "Come on," Aero whispers, patting the panel as if comforting a wounded animal. "Just a few more kilometers." They climb out of the ravine and re-enter the thicker forest. The trees loom above them, black branches clawing at the sky. Snow presses hard on the boughs, occasionally dropping in heavy clumps onto the tank's hull. Visibility drops further. The blizzard thickens. Inside the tank, the crew falls into a grim silence, each man surrendering to his thoughts. Ilka breaks it first. "Arnie, do you ever wonder why they mocked these tanks so much?" Aero glances at him. He's heard the jokes too. Toy tanks, tin cans, tractor armor. Soviet officers had laughed openly at Finnish equipment, at the old rifles, the mismatched artillery, the farmers with skis. Arnie exhales slowly, fogging the air. Because they think power is everything. That bigger guns, bigger armies, bigger machines win wars. "And don't they?" Ilka asks quietly. Arnie's lips press into a thin line. "Sometimes." Aero grips the levers harder. "But not today." Arnie looks at him with tired but proud eyes. "Not today." The forest opens briefly onto a frozen marsh. The wind howls across it, snow whipping sideways. In the far distance, a repetitive hammering echoes artillery. Distant but not distant enough. Aero squints through the slit. Movement. 9 o'clock. Arnie snaps up the periscope. Dark shapes move along the tree-line. Figures trudging, heads bowed against the wind. Finnish soldiers. Survivors. A ragged platoon making its slow retreat toward the rally point. Arnie bangs the hatch and signals them. A few lift their heads and wave weakly. Their faces are gaunt, pale, frostbitten. Many carry only sidearms, rifles lost or abandoned in earlier fights. One man breaks off from the group and approaches the tank. His white camo smock is torn, and there's dried blood on his sleeve. Corporal Matty Siren from the Sala front. Aero recognizes him by the distinctive knife handle sticking from his belt, the kind craftsman carve with family patterns. Matty taps on the hull. "Arnie, thank God. The Soviets are pushing hard toward Kollaa Bridge. They've got armor and artillery. We barely escaped." Arnie leans out, snow blowing into his face. "How many?" "A company, maybe 2. And more behind them." Aero's stomach twists. Ilka mutters, "We can't fight that." Arnie doesn't look away from Maddie. "What's the terrain?" "Thick forest. Narrow trail. Perfect for ambush." Arnie nods slowly. "Then we'll buy time." Maddie looks at the battered tank, disbelief creasing his brow. "With this, you're outnumbered 10-1. Arnie's reply is quiet but firm. "Then we'll kill 10. The wind howls again, drowning the silence. Finally, Maddie salutes, brief, sharp, and returns to his men. The platoon disappears into the blizzard as if swallowed by the snow. Arrow watches them vanish. His breath catches. "We're really doing this?" Arnie closes the hatch, sealing them back into the cramped iron womb. "Yes," he says, "because no one else can reach Kollaa in time." Ilka loads another round. "Then let's go earn our place in the stories." The tank creeps forward into the white void of the blizzard, the place where the world dissolves into snow and sound and fear. Ahead lies Kollaa. Ahead lies the main Soviet force. Ahead lies the moment when Finland's toy tank must stand alone once again. But they do not retreat. They go forward. Section 6. Wolves in the Snow. January 2nd, 1940. Pre-dawn. The wilderness south of Suomussalmi. The blizzard slackens at last. Not much. Just enough for the sky to show its first faint streaks of gray. Just enough for the tank commander to lift the hatch without choking on wind-driven snow. The forest is still a white void, but the worst of the storm has passed, leaving a brittle stillness in its wake. Inside the Vickers, Eero Hämäläinen feels the stiffness in his bones settling like ice. He has not slept in almost a full day. His eyelids burn. His fingers are raw even through wool-lined gloves. But the tank is still running, and that alone is a small miracle. Sergeant Arnie Virtanen peers through binoculars fogged around the edges. "Storms pushing east," he mutters. "The Soviets will try to move again. They think bad weather protects them." Ilka Karjalainen laughs weakly. "It protects us too." Arnie shakes his head. "No, we use the weather. They fight against it." He lowers the binoculars. "And the weather always wins." Arrow pushes open the driver's slit a hair wider. The world outside looks unreal. Trees bent under the weight of ice. The ground lost beneath half a meter of drifted snow. Visibility is still miserable, but the shapes no longer dance and blur with every gust. The engine hums a steady, reluctant rhythm. Behind them, Finnish ski patrols regroup, emerging from the forest one by one like pale shadows rising from the earth. Lieutenant Jukka Lehtinen approaches, frost clinging to his beard like powdered sugar. "You're still alive," he says with a weary grin. Arnie smirks. "Mostly." The lieutenant plants his ski poles in the snow. "New orders. We're pulling east. Recon says the 44th Division is pushing along Raate Road with everything they've got. Artillery, supply trains, even cavalry." Ilka mutters, "A whole division? Against us?" Leightonen's expression darkens. "Against Suomussalmi. We're just the wolves circling the herd." Arrow feels his heartbeat quicken. If the reports are accurate, the Red Army intends to break through the encirclement and reclaim the village, or sweep into Finland's interior. Either outcome could be fatal. Arnie closes the hatch and drops back into the turret. The interior feels smaller every hour. "Driver, warm her up." "We move." Arrow obeys. The Vickers lurches forward, the engine complaining, the tracks snapping loose ice from their treads. They travel east through dense forest, following narrow hunting trails that no Soviet vehicle could ever survive. The tank moves at walking speed, weaving between trunks that scrape the armor like skeletal fingers. Each kilometer feels like 10. Snow thins. The wind dies. For the first time in days, the forest is quiet. Too quiet. Ilka leans forward. "Anyone else feel like we're being watched?" Arnie doesn't answer immediately. He lifts the periscope and scans the tree line. Nothing moves. Then, a single raven croaks from a frozen branch overhead. Arnie exhales. "We're close." Birds avoid artillery barrages. Arrow swallows hard. So the Soviets are near. Very near. They push on. Minutes later, faint vibrations tremble through the frozen ground. The distant rumble of heavy engines. Soviet engines. Multiple. Ilka-10s. BT-7s again? Arnie shakes his head. No. Heavier. The ground trembles once more, then fades, then returns closer. Arrow's breath catches. Artillery tractors? Arnie narrows his eyes. Supply columns. Ilka mutters. If they reach Suomussalmi. They won't. Arnie snaps. Not if we get ahead of them. Arrow feels fear and determination not inside his chest. They are 3 men in a tank the rest of the world considers obsolete. And yet, in this forest, in this winter, surrounded by terrain that kills steel and men with equal ease, they are hunters. Wolves. They crest a snow-covered ridge. Below them, half visible through the thinning haze, the first elements of the 44th Division creep forward in a long, vulnerable line stretching deeper into Finland. Trucks overloaded with fuel. Horse-drawn sledges carrying crates. Columns of infantry wrapped in blankets. T-20 SAXS struggling through ruts of ice. An army slow, exposed, blind. Ilka's breath escapes as a sharp plume of steam. There they are. Arnie studies the mass of men and machines. Section 7's kill zone, he murmurs. The place the map called the Forest Titans. Arrow closes his eyes briefly. He knows what comes next. Not a battle. Not yet. A stalk. A circling. A tightening of the trap. Arnie lowers himself back into the tank. Voice steady. Cold. Resolute. Signal Leighton in. Tell him Section 6 is in position. Ilka switches on the radio. Arrow tightens his gloves, flexes his frozen fingers over the controls. Outside, the storm clouds finally break. Dawn paints the snow in pale gold, and the wolves begin to move. Section 7. The forest turns against them. January 3rd, 1940. The Raate Road, near Suomussalmi. The snow falls in slow, silent waves, drifting across the narrow forest road like pale curtains. The wind hisses through the pines, rattling branches glazed with ice. Visibility has shrunk to mere meters, white layers of storm and smoke swirling together. Yet the men of the Soviet 44th Rifle Division continue trudging forward, engines coughing in protest, boots cracking frozen earth. Colonel Alexei Vinogradov rides in the cab of a stranded supply truck, its motor long since frozen solid. Through the frosted windshield, he can see pieces of wreckage half buried in the snow. Overturned sleds, shattered crates, dead horses stiffened in unnatural angles. His convoy, hundreds of trucks, artillery pieces, and the pride of the Ukrainian 44th, has stretched into a vulnerable, unprotected serpent across miles of Finnish forest. He knows it. Every officer knows it. But none dare say it aloud. Because the silence of the forest is a warning. Because the Finns are here. A burst of gunfire cracks somewhere in the tree line. Another truck driver slumps forward, glass exploding inward. Panic ripples through the column. Soviet infantry scatter into ditches, rifles raised, but the enemy doesn't reveal themselves. As always, the shots come from angles impossible to predict. Vinogradov clenches his jaw and whispers, "They're toying with us." And in a sense, they are. A few hundred meters away, hidden beneath layered snow camouflage, Lieutenant Aino Sari lowers the sights of his Lottie Salaranta machine gun. His breath fogs the frigid air as he surveys the chaos he helped unleash. Behind him, a line of Finnish riflemen move like ghosts between trees, repositioning silently before their presence can be pinpointed. They fire in short, precise bursts, never enough to reveal strength, always enough to sow doubt. But today, something different joins the ambush. A pair of squat, compact silhouettes crawl out from behind a snowbank. Vickers 6-ton tanks, their small frames compact enough to maneuver through the narrow forest trails, rumble forward with engines muffled by a blanket of snow and pine branches strapped to their hulls. To the Soviets, these machines had once been a joke. Laughably outdated, underpowered, hardly deserving the word tank. But here, in the dense labyrinth of taiga, among trees too tight for T-20s XS or armored cars, the toy tanks glide with unsettling purpose. Inside the lead Vickers, Corporal Lauri Tenhunen feels the vibration of the engine through frozen steel, the familiar rhythm he's learned to trust. The interior smells of oil, metal, and the faint aroma of pine from the camouflage tied over the turret. His loader braces himself as the tank nudges over an icy ridge, the treads gripping snow with surprising stability. The Soviet trucks ahead of them are stuck, wheels spinning helplessly, engines suffocating in the cold. Infantry cluster near the vehicles, using them as shields. They're cold, hungry, exhausted, and now they're being encircled by machines they had laughed at only weeks earlier. Tenhunen's commander gives a tap on the turret wall. Range? 70 meters. Fire when ready. The gun barks. One deafening, metallic cough that echoes across the snowbound forest. A Soviet truck erupts into flame, light rippling across frost-coated branches like a sunrise from hell. Soldiers dive away as burning canvas collapses in on itself. Another shot follows. Another explosion. Another piece of the Soviet column becomes a blazing marker on the Raate Road. The Finns encircle with the patience of hunters. They don't rush the engagement. They strangle it. Slowly, methodically, each Vickers tank pushes the Soviets closer into a funnel of chaos, driving them toward Finnish kill zones pre-sighted days earlier. Lieutenant Sari watches as the miniature armor creeps between trees that no normal tank could pass. Their small silhouettes almost disappear among the snow, their engines drowned by the storm winds. He murmurs, "They'll regret underestimating these machines." Not far away, Soviet Captain Mikhail Zykov sprints through deep snow, shouting for his men to regroup. But every movement is hindered by the cold. Every attempt to reorganize is disrupted by invisible gunfire. Every step feels like sinking into an ambush, because that's exactly what it is. A shell lands near him, throwing snow high into the air. Zykov falls, ears ringing. When he rises, he sees something surreal through the clearing smoke. A tiny tank, no bigger than a field tractor, trundling forward with relentless momentum. It's almost comical in size, except for the barrel aimed directly at his company. He finally understands the truth. Small doesn't mean weak. Not here. Not now. Behind the Soviet line, soldiers begin abandoning their vehicles, scattering into the forest in desperation. But retreat only leads them deeper into the waiting arms of Finnish ski troops, who cut through the storm with rifles and Molotovs like wraiths of the winter. The ambush tightens. The road becomes a prison of fire and metal, and the toy tanks keep advancing. Tenhunen reloads as the tank pushes past another destroyed truck. A dead horse lies half-buried beside the path, steam rising faintly from its body. He feels a brief pang in his chest. It's not the killing that shakes him, but the scale of the tragedy unfolding. Thousands of men trapped, freezing, starving, dying. But the Finns cannot relent. Not after what the Soviets have already inflicted upon their homeland. Outside, the storm thickens. Snowflakes swirl like phantom dancers around burning wrecks. The Raate Road glows with shifting, flickering orange. An infernal procession stretching into the deep forest. This is not a battle. This is an unraveling. And the Soviet 44th Division is coming apart at the seams. The forest has turned against them. The weather has turned against them. Even the tanks they once mocked have turned against them. And the night is far from over. Section 8. The Long Night of the 44th Division. January 4th, 1940. Midnight. The Raate Road. The wind screams across the treetops like some ancient creature awakened by bloodshed. Gusts slam against the frozen canvas tarps of abandoned Soviet trucks, rattling them like hollow drums. The temperature plunges to -40°C, one of the coldest nights of the Winter War. The sky above the forest glitters with hard, sharp stars, cold, indifferent witnesses to the unraveling of an entire Soviet division. The Finnish ambush that began at dusk has now spread like wildfire across miles of woodland. What had once been a rigid, linear column of men and machines is now a chaotic sprawl of shattered vehicles, burning carts, and scattered infantry fighting for their lives in darkness. Everywhere, the sound of the night is punctuated by the same repeating rhythm. The crack of Finnish rifles, the deep thud of tank guns, the shriek of incoming mortars, and the soft, terrible moaning of wounded men buried in snow. Inside a makeshift Soviet field HQ tent half collapsed under ice, Colonel Vinogradov stares at the flickering lantern on his table. The flame bends each time a gust seeps through the torn canvas. His gloves tremble. Not from fear, he insists to himself, but from cold. Bone-deep cold that no wool coat or felt boots can resist. He has received no reinforcements, no supplies, no updated orders. The last radio message from the 9th Army headquarters came nearly 8 hours ago. A vague demand to break through the encirclement. The radio operator tried to respond, but the signal dissolved into static. Now, Vinogradov stands alone, surrounded by maps that no longer match reality and officers huddled in silence, listening to the rising crescendo of gunfire outside. He tries to cling to the belief that the 44th Rifle Division can still push west toward Suomussalmi. But deep down, he knows the truth. They are trapped, frozen in place, dismantled piece by an enemy they underestimated. Outside, the night erupts in a blinding flash as a Finnish mortar round crashes into a fuel truck. The explosion sends a geyser of flame spiraling into the sky, painting the trees in a hellish orange glow. Snowflakes melt mid-air, raining down as hot droplets that hiss upon contact with ice. The shockwave hammers through the camp. Men are thrown off their feet. Those who can still stand scramble to take cover behind whatever wreckage they can find. Crouched behind an overturned sled, Private Andrei Lobanov shields his face from flying embers. His rifle shakes in numb fingers. He hasn't eaten in 2 days, and his last drink of water came from a melted chunk of snow scraped off a truck tire. His boots, soaked hours earlier, have stiffened into blocks of ice. He can no longer feel 2 of his toes. But the cold isn't what terrifies him. It's the silence between gunshots. Because every time the gunfire pauses, he hears faint scraping sounds in the forest. The whisper of skis gliding over powder. The soft crunch of boots finding purchase in ice. The Finns are moving again. Lobanov lifts his rifle and scans the tree line illuminated by firelight. Shadows stretch and warp across the trunks, but then he sees them. Figures in white. Small teams, rarely more than 3 or 4, fanning out with the predatory calm of wolves. They move with confidence, with patience, as if they know exactly which branch to avoid, which patch of snow to cross, which angle grants them the advantage. He squeezes his eyes shut. Back home, the newspapers had mocked the Finnish army, called it small, backward, primitive. But nothing about the men surrounding him feels primitive. They feel inevitable. A sudden rumble shakes the ground. The second Vickers tank breaks through a snowbank, its pale camouflage turning it almost invisible except for the glint on its barrel. It maneuvers around a pile of rubble with surgical precision, its treads grinding through ice. A Soviet machine gun nest opens fire on it, but the rounds ricochet harmlessly off its frontal armor. Inside the Finnish machine, Corporal Lauri Tenhunen wipes a layer of condensation from his eyepiece. The interior temperature has risen just enough for breath to fog the glass. His gunner steadies the 37mm Bofors cannon and lines up the next target. Fire! Another thunderous boom. Another Soviet truck erupts in flames. Tenhunen feels no triumph. Only focus. Only duty. He thinks of his brothers fighting at Suomussalmi, of the families evacuated from villages across the border, of the land behind him, his land, depending on this stand. Outside, Soviet soldiers break into a desperate run. Some flee deeper into the forest, unaware that Finnish ski detachments lie in wait. Others try to climb onto the sides of immobilized trucks, hoping to use them as shields. But the Vickers keeps advancing. Every few meters, Tenhunen's tank stops just long enough to unleash another shell. Then it moves again before Soviet artillery can respond. The small, nimble machine dances between trees that would have trapped any larger tank. And with each shot, the Soviet line fractures further. On the far end of the road, Lieutenant Ainosari's platoon watches as the Soviet defense collapses. He lowers his binoculars, the frost on the lenses catching the firelight. "This is the breaking point," he murmurs. His men nod, but no one celebrates. They all know the hardest part is yet to come. When an army breaks, it becomes unpredictable. Desperate men with nothing left to lose can be more dangerous than organized units. The Finns push forward in coordinated waves. Ski troops glide between burning vehicles. Snipers reposition to cut off escape routes. Small anti-tank teams approach from angles no Soviet commander ever anticipated. All around them, the forest crackles with flames, groans with the collapse of wooden crates and shattered sleds, and rings with the pained cries of men swallowed by the cold. The night stretches on, merciless and unbroken. And for the first time, even the Soviets realize they are not fighting an army. They are fighting the winter itself, and men who have made the winter their ally. Section 9. Encirclement at Dawn. January 5, 1940. 3:40 hours. The Raate Road, Western Approach. The flames that had raged through the night have dulled to a deep, smoldering glow. Smoke hangs low across the snow-covered road like a choking fog, drifting between the tree trunks in heavy, suspended layers. Beneath it, the remains of the Soviet 44th Division lie scattered, splintered into pockets of exhausted, freezing men surrounded on all sides. The wind has calmed, the snow has stopped, but the silence that settles over the Raate Road is not peace. It is the quiet of men who understand they are trapped. Inside a shallow trench dug hastily beside an overturned truck, Private Andrei Lobanov feels the approach of dawn as a change in the cold. The air grows sharper, clearer, as if the forest itself is waking. His body aches from the unrelenting chill, but something else gnaws at him now. A hollow dread that seems to echo through the thin walls of his mind. He hears a rustle in the snow. Not footsteps, something softer, smoother. Skis. He clutches his rifle and peers upward through the drifting smoke. At first he sees only shapes, dark outlines shifting between the skeletal branches. Then the first Finnish patrol emerges from the haze, silent, steady, moving with a confidence that feels unreal to soldiers who have stumbled through chaos for 2 straight days. They're closing the noose. Lobanov grips his rifle tighter. For a moment he imagines firing, but he knows it would be pointless. His hands are too numb to aim, and his platoon is gone, swallowed by the forest and the night. He lowers the barrel. The Finns glide past him, unaware or uninterested in a lone soldier buried in snow. They aren't hunting individuals. They're hunting formations, destroying clusters of resistance before they can reorganize. This isn't a chase. It's a dismantling. A few hundred meters away, Lieutenant Aino Sari raises a hand and signals his men forward. The ski troops fan out with practiced precision, their white uniforms blending seamlessly with the snow. Sari's face is reddened by windburn, his lashes crusted with frost, but his eyes are sharp, watching every flicker of movement along the shattered road. He has fought in the forests around Suomussalmi for weeks. He has watched Soviet forces advance like a juggernaut, columns stretching kilometers, armored lines that seemed unstoppable. But here, in the deep winter woods of the Kainuu region, numbers mean nothing. Logistics mean everything. And the Soviets have none left. He breathes out, watching the vapor curl upward. This is the end for them, he says quietly. One of his corporals nods. No one can get through this road now. Ahead of them, a new sound rises above the sighing wind. The grinding rumble of tank treads. Sari tenses for a moment, fearful that a Soviet counterattack has finally materialized. But then he sees the silhouette emerging from the smoke. A Vickers 6-ton, its squat frame dusted with fresh snow. Behind it, another, and another. The trio advances in staggered formation, moving with such deliberate calm that they seem more like ghosts than machines. Their engines are muffled by cold and camouflage, the sound swallowed by the forest. Inside the lead tank, Corporal Lauri Tenhunen leans against the frigid steel interior, swallowing exhaustion. He and his crew have been fighting for nearly 20 hours straight. Their hands tremble, their faces pale from cold and strain. But the tank still moves. The machine still protects them. The mission still demands their endurance. Visibility? He asks. His driver wipes the periscope lens and squints. 50 meters at best. Smoke's thinning, though. Good. We move until we link with Sari's men. The tank rolls forward, its treads crunching over spent casings and frozen debris. A Soviet 76mm field gun lies half-buried ahead, its crew dead or missing. The Vickers pauses for a moment as Tenhunen examines the position through the slit. He recognizes something in the scene, the fear frozen on the gunner's face, the frost clinging to torn uniforms, the sheer magnitude of collapse. "We keep going," he murmurs. As dawn approaches, the Finnish encirclement tightens to its final ring. Inside a cluster of trucks farther down the road, Colonel Vinogradov tries to muster the remnants of his command. His officers gather around a small, sputtering fire shielded by piled crates. Their faces are waxen from cold, their uniforms stiff with ice. He studies them, the men entrusted to him. Men who marched with confidence into this forest days ago. Men he has now led to the edge of ruin. "We must break out," he insists, voice hoarse. "We move east, regroup, reform the column." But the officers exchange glances. Major Yevgeny Orlov steps forward. His voice shakes, not from fear, but fury. "Break out? With what, Comrade Colonel? Half of our men are missing. We've lost the artillery. Half our trucks are burning wrecks. Our ammunition is almost gone. The Finns are everywhere," another officer adds. "Every trail we follow leads into another ambush. We still have rifles," Vinogradov snaps. "We still have discipline." But even he can hear the emptiness of the words. Discipline doesn't matter when the forest swallows your formations whole. Rifles don't matter when ammunition freezes in magazines. Courage doesn't matter when your enemy moves like the winter wind. Vinogradov sags onto a crate, exhaling a bitter cloud of steam. The realization hits him like ice. They were mocked for overconfidence. But they had mocked the Finns first. Mocked their toy tanks. Mocked their tiny army. Mocked their belief that forests and snow could stop the Red Army. Now the forests are the enemy. The snow is the enemy. And the men in white have become specters of annihilation. Light begins to creep over the treetops. Dawn reveals the full devastation of the Raate Road, a frozen graveyard stretching as far as the eye can see. And the Finns keep advancing. Section 10, The Collapse of Command. January 5, 1940, 6:10 hours. Eastern sector of the Raate Road. The first rays of daylight creep through the black pines, washing the battlefield in a cold, bluish glow. The fires that raged through the night have burned low, leaving behind skeletal remains of trucks and shattered sleds silhouetted against the snow like the bones of prehistoric beasts. The smoke thins, revealing scenes that the darkness had mercifully concealed. Bodies lie half-buried in drifting snowbanks. Fallen horses lie stiff and contorted. Rifles are frozen into men's hands, their breeches locked solid by the night's brutal temperature. The entire Soviet 44th Rifle Division, once a proud military formation, now looks less like an army and more like a refugee column caught in the jaws of a glacier. Inside a makeshift command circle marked by a cluster of abandoned supply crates, Colonel Alexei Vinogradov stands trembling in the light of dawn. His eyes are bloodshot, hollowed by desperation. His fur-lined coat is caked in frost. Behind him, his remaining staff officers form a ragged, shivering semicircle, their expressions carved from equal parts exhaustion and disbelief. Vinogradov studies the map spread across a crate. It is useless now, its neat lines and colored markers a mockery of the chaos around them. Every route he traces leads to disaster. To the west, Finnish troops hold Suomussalmi. To the north and south, Mahdi encirclements choke the forest. To the east, the road back toward the Soviet border is cut in multiple places. He presses his gloved hand against his forehead. "This cannot be happening," he mutters. An entire division, trapped by skiers and tractors. No one corrects him. No one dares say the truth aloud. The Finns have not trapped them by chance. They have trapped them by design. Major Orlov clears his throat, his breath a trembling plume in the cold air. "Comrade Colonel, the 44th can still attempt a breakout if we consolidate what remains of the 25th Regiment. Reports suggest they hold a position 2 kilometers east, though communications are uncertain." Vinogradov lowers his hand slowly. His eyes flicker with something like hope. And the rest of the men? Orlov hesitates. Scattered. Disorganized. Many have frozen or deserted into the woods. The colonel swallows hard. He hears the unspoken truth. We are no longer a division. Before he can respond, a sudden series of muffled thumps echo through the forest. Snow shakes from branches. Officers instinctively duck. Seconds later, plumes of white explode nearby. Finnish 81mm mortars, landing with unnerving accuracy. Take cover! Vinogradov shouts. The officers dive behind crates and overturn sleds as another mortar round impacts, showering the command post with shards of frozen wood. The bombardment is not heavy, just a probing attack. A warning. A message. We know where you are. Captain Zaitsev scrambles to his feet. Sir, we must relocate. The Finns will zero in on our position. Vinogradov nods numbly. Break camp. Now. As his officers scatter, gathering what few documents and supplies remain, the colonel lingers for a moment. He stares east along the road, what little remains visible through the forest. In his mind, he tries to imagine what this place looked like before the war. A quiet logging route carved through endless trees, a place where hunters and villagers might have passed in peace. Now it is a corridor of ruin. A line of burning trucks marks the path. Finnish skiers flank both sides. The Vickers tanks, small and almost unassuming in daylight, patrol the rear of the Finnish encirclement with the calm confidence of predators who know no prey can escape. Vinogradov feels something crack inside him. Not fear, not anger, resignation. For the first time, he understands fully what has happened. His command did not fall to superior numbers or overwhelming firepower. It fell to preparation, to terrain mastery, to the winter itself, and to an enemy whose humility had disguised lethal capability. He turns away, boots crunching through snow as he moves to regroup what remains of his headquarters. But even as he does, he hears the sound of engines approaching from the northwest, low, steady, unmistakable. He freezes. It is not the deep mechanical growl of Soviet T-20 SIXS. It is not the rattling chatter of armored cars. It is something smaller, lighter, more precise. Through the thinning smoke emerges the lead Vickers 6-ton, its turret partially wrapped in white cloth. Snow clings to its riveted armor. The morning light glints off its barrel like a sharpened blade. The Finns have arrived. Vinogradov stares, momentarily paralyzed. The tank's size seems almost absurd, like a child's machine in a real war. He remembers the laughter at headquarters weeks earlier when reports first mentioned small Finnish tanks. The jokes, the dismissive snorts. But seeing it now, rolling forward with unhurried confidence, flanked by unseen ski troops weaving between trees, he realizes the truth. This tank was never a joke. It was a warning. Inside the vehicle, Corporal Lauri Tenhunen wipes frost from his optics. The cold has stiffened the controls, but the engine hums steadily behind him. His crew is exhausted, but alert. He watches the Soviet command group through the slit of the periscope. Officers scrambling, gesturing, shouting contradictory orders. "Commander," he says quietly, "we've found their HQ." The tank commander leans over his shoulder, studying the silhouettes. He sees the cluster of officers, the spread-out documents, the frantic movements. He nods once. "Load he, but hold fire until our ski teams close the flank." Tenhunen acknowledges with a crisp nod. Outside, Finnish riflemen glide into positions using fallen trucks for cover. Sari's platoon approaches from the north, moving with a steady rhythm. Breathing in unison, rifles raised. Their white uniforms blend into the snowy landscape so perfectly that even trained Soviet eyes cannot track their advance. Vinogradov watches them come. The small tanks, the silent infantry, the winter warriors who have turned the forest into a weapon. His breath catches. God help us! But on the Raate Road in the winter of 1939 to 1940, only the winter decides who lives and who dies. The noose tightens, and the 44th Division stands at the edge of total collapse. Section 11. When the noose closes. January 5, 1940. 6:32 hours. Eastern Sector, Raate Road. The forest seems to hold its breath. For a long moment, nothing moves. Not the drifting smoke. Not the frost-coated branches. Not even the exhausted figures of Soviet soldiers clustered behind burned-out trucks. Only the faint crackle of dying fires breaks the stillness. Inside the shattered command post, Colonel Vinogradov's final orders echo uselessly in the air. Officers shout for units that no longer exist. Runners slip on ice, carrying messages to companies that have already frozen, scattered, or vanished into the snow. And somewhere beyond the rising haze, a low mechanical growl emerges. Major Orlov hears it first. A sound too steady to be a truck, too calm to be Soviet. He raises his head above a shattered crate. A small shape materializes between the pines, compact, almost modest in size, its outlines softened by fresh snow strapped across its turret. A white camouflaged Vickers 6-ton creeps forward with unnerving patience. Orlov's throat tightens. Another appears behind it. Then another. A line of Finnish ski soldiers flanks the tanks, gliding silently between trees. Their movements are fluid, deliberate, predators advancing with complete confidence that their prey is already trapped. The Soviet soldiers nearest the road stagger back in horror. Some raise rifles with shaking hands. Others simply stare, too numb to understand that the end has begun. A shot cracks from a panicked private. Then another. Wild. Unaimed. Inside the lead Vickers, Corporal Lauri Tenhunen steadies his breath. "Commander," he says quietly. "They're firing without orders. They're broken." The tank commander nods once. "Hold. Let the infantry position." From the treeline, Lieutenant Anosari raises a hand, signaling 2 squads to fan out and cut the last lines of retreat. His breath forms pale clouds around his face as he murmurs, "This is it. Final ring." Finnish riflemen slide into cover behind frozen wreckage. Their white uniforms blend seamlessly into the snow, turning them into shifting ghosts among black pines. On the Soviet side, panic spreads like fire on dry straw. A political officer screams for counterattack, but no one listens. He grabs a fleeing soldier by the collar, only to be shoved into the snow as the man bolts into the forest. Another group tries to mount a machine gun on a half-frozen sled, but the weapon jams instantly, its oily internals stiffened into a movable iron by the night's cold. Mortarmen attempt to set up a firing line, but their tubes crack as they warm them too fast. Someone cries out, "Khalid! Khalid!" The cold. Always the cold. Orlov turns to Vinogradov, voice hoarse. "Comrade Colonel, we must surrender. If we fight now, we die for nothing." Vinogradov does not answer. He stares ahead, past the fires, past the bodies, past the rising wall of Finns, into the void that was once his division. He whispers, "We were never meant to survive this road." A sudden roar shakes the air as Tenhunen's Vickers fires a warning shot, blasting apart an abandoned truck. The explosion sends flames spiraling skyward, illuminating the frozen horror stretching the length of the Raate Road. Soviet soldiers drop their rifles. Others fall to their knees. Some simply collapse, unconscious from exhaustion. Sari raises his voice, not shouting, but projecting authority earned from weeks of fighting. "Lay down your weapons. No more dying today." In the echoing stillness that follows, something breaks. Not bones, not ice, but resistance itself. The men of the 44th Rifle Division lower their rifles. One by one, then in groups, then all at once. The forest exhales. The noose closes, and the last hope of the 44th goes silent under falling snow. Section 12. The Last Stand of the 44th. January 5, 1940. 7:10 hours. Raate Road, Eastern End. The encirclement is complete. Snow settles over the ruined supply columns like a burial shroud. The remnants of the Soviet 44th Rifle Division cluster behind scattered wreckage. Men huddled shoulder to shoulder, rifles shaking in numb hands, the last flickers of discipline fading under the crushing weight of hunger and cold. Major Orlov crouches behind a destroyed truck axle, sucking air through clenched teeth. His boots have frozen so stiff that each step feels like walking in wooden blocks. Around him, the final pockets of resistance fire sporadically into the forest, the shots hollow and desperate. But the Finns do not rush in. They tighten the ring slowly, methodically, like hunters finishing a wounded elk. A low rumble approaches from the west. Orlov looks up and sees the outline of another Vickers 6-ton emerging from the wall of trees, its hull draped in fresh snow, its barrel already leveled. Behind it, ski troops move in a staggered formation, rifles steady, faces unreadable beneath hoods rimed with ice. Orlov understands instantly what the machine represents. Not power, not terror, but inevitability. He raises his head above the wreckage and bellows, "Hold your fire! We surrender!" But few soldiers hear him. Many are too far gone, shivering, delirious, or unconscious. Others simply continue firing, whether from fear or inertia, and the firefight sputters on with no coordination, no command. The Vickers halts. Inside, Corporal Tenhunen exhales. "Commander!" The tank commander peers through the periscope at the disjointed Soviet survivors. He sees no formation, no structure, only scattered pockets of men, half frozen and terrified. "Hold fire," he says. "They've broken." Outside, Lieutenant Sari approaches the Soviet position, raising a gloved hand. He calls out in accented Russian, "Lay down your weapons. No more firing. The road is ours." Some Soviets drop their rifles immediately, relief flooding their faces. Others hesitate. A political officer raises his pistol, not to shoot, but to end his own life. A Finnish sniper fires first. The man collapses silently. Sari's men fan out, approaching cautiously. The last shots taper off. Then, silence. A silence so complete it feels unnatural. The forest itself seems to pause, as though absorbing the enormity of what has happened. An entire Soviet division, shattered and frozen along a forest road thousands of kilometers from home. Sari lowers his rifle. "It's done," he says quietly. Behind him, Tenhunen's Vickers powers down, its engine coughing twice before settling into a low idle. The crew sags in exhaustion, every muscle trembling from cold and strain. For the first time in days, no one fires a shot. The Winter War's bloodiest road has gone quiet. Section 13. Aftermath on the Road of Death. January 6, 1940. Morning. A freezing mist clings to the Raate Road as Finnish troops move through the wreckage, collecting abandoned rifles, documenting vehicles, and tending to survivors. Makeshift fires dot the forest edge, melting snow for water, warming frostbitten limbs. The Finns recover over 40 tanks and armored vehicles, nearly all Soviet. But 3 small Vickers stand among them, smoke-stained and battered, yet still operational. Lieutenant Sari runs a hand along the side of one of them. The metal is dented from shrapnel. The front plate bears the scars of 3 near penetrations. Pine branches still cling to its turret from yesterday's camouflage. He murmurs to the crew, "You've earned your place in every story we'll tell after this." Corporal Tenhunen manages a tired grin. "We were never meant to fight an army," he replies, "just to slow them." Sari gestures around them. "You did much more than that." Section 14. Colonel Vinogradov's fate. Later that day, Finnish troops discover the body of Colonel Alexei Vinogradov half-buried beneath drifting snow, not far from the destroyed command post. His uniform is frozen solid, his map case still clutched under one arm. Sari orders his body brought to a sheltered area. "Treat him with respect," he tells his men. "He died with his command." A Finnish soldier asks softly, "Will Moscow blame him?" Sari's expression tightens. "They will blame anyone but themselves." He is right. History will record that Vinogradov was executed in absentia, blamed for incompetence, cowardice, and the destruction of his division. Even though the seeds of disaster were planted far above him, the forest keeps its own truths. But Moscow will not want them. Section 15. The end of the 44th Division. By evening, the totals become clear. Over 17,000 Soviet soldiers killed or captured. Dozens of tanks and hundreds of trucks destroyed. The 44th Rifle Division ceases to exist. The Raate Road becomes synonymous with catastrophe. The Red Army, shaken by the defeat, overhauls its training, logistics, and tactics. Even Stalin begins to understand the cost of underestimating a determined defender in impossible terrain. For Finland, it is a victory beyond calculation. Proof that ingenuity, terrain mastery, and sheer willpower can shatter even the mightiest foe. Section 16. The Toy Tanks That Changed a War. January 7, 1940. A small forest clearing near Suomussalmi. Corporal Tenhunen stands beside his Vickers, a mug of thawed snow water in his hand. A mechanic works on the tank's left track, humming a melancholy folk tune. Eero Hämäläinen and Sergeant Arni Virtanen arrive from the 1st Battalion lines, their own Vickers idling behind them. The crews greet one another, exhausted, frostbitten, but alive. Arni shakes Tenhunen's hand. Did you hear? Command is reporting that yesterday's operation broke the 44th completely. Tenhunen nods. And our tanks. Arni pats the hull of his Vickers with gloved fingers. Not bad for machines the Soviets said could be pushed over by hand. The men share a tired laugh. Eero traces a finger along the rivets of the tank. Tiny beads of steel holding together a machine many called obsolete. But not here. Not in this winter. Not in this war. These little things might have saved us, he whispers. Arni nods. They saved much more than that. Section 17. What remains? As the winter war continues, the Finnish Vickers tanks fight in more battles at Kumo, at Hankaniemi, and along fortified lines near Viipuri. Many are lost. Some survive. But the legend of the toy tanks is already sealed in blood and ice. By the war's end in March 1940, nearly all of Finland's armor will be destroyed, captured, or worn beyond repair. But every Finnish soldier who survived the forests of Suomussalmi remembers the same truth. It wasn't what the tanks were. It was what they allowed the Finns to do. Delay, ambush, strike, escape, survive. And in those frozen forests, that was enough to rewrite the fate of armies. Epilogue. Snow over steel. Years later, long after the Winter War ends, long after new armies march across Europe and new machines dwarf the old Vickers, a forgotten tank sits rusting beside a quiet Finnish lake. Its paint is faded, its turret frozen in place. Moss creeps over its tracks. Children climb on it in summer. Snow buries it in winter. Most never know the battles it fought, the soldiers it carried, the fire it survived. Only a small plaque beside it hints at its truth. Vickers 6-ton. Talvisoda, 1939 to 1940. Not a toy. And in the whisper of winter wind through the pines, one can almost hear the echo of that first shot in the snowbound forest, when a little tank proved that courage, cunning, and cold steel could defy an empire.